morning, our dear students. Today we will start with you to study new science. It is science about tuberculosis. It's called physiology, and today we will talk with you about history of development of tuberculosis, etiology of tuberculosis, epidemiology, pathogenesis, and immunity of tuberculosis. The World Health Organization proclaimed tuberculosis as a global danger. According to its forecasts, there will be 90 million new tuberculosis cases in the world during the decade. Of those who will fall ill, 30 million people may die in the current decade. Nowadays, the world scientists distinguish three union tuberculosis epidemic. As you can see as a slide, you see this is three union. It is tuberculosis, it is MDR-TB, it is multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, and the AIDS. In this slide you can see TB incidence whole the world, and you can see dark green color. It is countries where the TB incidence is very high. It is Africa and Asia, and such country as China and Mongolia, Indonesia, Myanmar, Thailand. In these countries, TB incidence is very high. Is the source of, if we talk about source of infection, this slide shows a violent sneeze, cough on film by high-speed photography showing large liquid droplets. Most of these large visible droplets will fall to the ground. However, the small droplets nuclei that can reach the deep lung are not visible and are 1.5 micrometer in size. Historical review. Tuberculosis as an illness is known since the ancient times. Tuberculosis have been presented in humans for thousands of years. Skeletal remains shown that prehistorical humans had tuberculosis, and tubercular decay has been found in the spines of Egyptian mummies. The term phthisis, consumption, appear first in Greek literature. Hippocrates identified phthisis as the most widespread disease of the time and noted that it was almost always fatal. The study of tuberculosis dates back to the canon of medicine written by Ibn Sina in 1020. He was the first physician to identify pulmonary tuberculosis as a contagious disease, the first to recognize the association with diabetes. In 1882, the German bacteriologist Robert Koch discovered the pathogen of tuberculosis, which was named Bacillus of Koch, or BK. Pirogov, a Russian scientist, studied clinical morphological properties of tuberculosis of various localization and for the first time described histological structure of tuberculosis granuloma. In this slide you can see Pirogov himself and the structure of tuberculosis granuloma. In 1887, Philip in Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland, provided the world's first anti-tuberculosis dispensary. This new institution offers the patient not only medical but also social help. In 1882, in Rome, Forlanini offered artificial pneumothorax for treating lung tuberculosis patient. In 1895, William Conrad Röntgen discovered X-rays, which have been widely used in medicine up to today. Mr. Röntgen received Nobel Prize for this discovery. The important achievement to the start of 20th century was creation by French scientist Calmet and Guerin the anti-tuberculosis vaccine called BCG, Bacilli Calmet and Guerin. Since 1935, mass vaccination began. Etiology. If we will talk with you about the etiology of tuberculosis, we must say that there are three types of Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It is Mycobacterium tuberculosis, Mycobacterium tuberculosis bovis, and Mycobacterium tuberculosis africanum. In this slide, you can see how it's shown under the microscopy, and you can see the way of contamination with tuberculosis. It is aerogenic way of contamination. Ways of contamination: aerogenic, elementary, contact, and transplant center. The basic way of transfer is airdrop. And the aerogenic ways of contamination have two ways. It is airdrop and air dust. The airdrop you can see in the slide, and air dust, the dried up and settled droplets sputum can rise in the air with the dust. In 95% of patients catch airdrop and air dust by. In this slide you can see under microscopy red sticks. It is sticks of Koch or Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It is also one picture under the electronic microscope, and you can see also the sticks of tuberculosis. You can see membrana, you can see nuclei inside of the sticks and other organelles. It is also electron microscopy of Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It also picture under the electron microscopy. You can see nuclei, other organelles, and membrana of Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Clinical classification of tuberculosis. Type. Firstly, we must to say type of tuberculosis process. It was first diagnosed tuberculosis or tuberculosis relapse or recidive, or it must be chronic tuberculosis. And second point, we must talk about clinical forms of tuberculosis. It is and A15 to 16. It is lung tuberculosis, primary tuberculosis complex, disseminated lung tuberculosis, nidus lung tuberculosis, infiltrative lung tuberculosis, caseous pneumonia, lung tuberculoma, lung fibrous cavernous tuberculosis, lung cirrhotic tuberculosis, lungs of respiratory organ combined with dust professional lung disease, coniotuberculosis. The third point, we must talk about characteristic of tuberculosis process. First one is localization of defect. Localization is detect the lung according to the number of segment, names of lung section, and other organs and systems according to anatomical name of localization and folio. Third one is presence of destruction. Destruction is present or destruction is not present. Partially, it's necessary to specify a phase of tuberculosis process: infiltration, decay, or thawing, or the suction, consideration, scarring, calcination. Complication of tuberculosis. Complication of lung tuberculosis is must be hemoptysis, lungs hemorrhage, spontaneous pneumothorax, lungs insufficiency, chronic lung hurt, atelectasis, amyloidosis. Complication of extrapulmonary tuberculosis is bronchial stenosis, pleural emphysema, fistula of bronchial or thoracic, renal insufficiency, sterility, comissure, ankylosis, amyloidosis, and other. Today we finish talk about history of development, etiology of tuberculosis, epidemiology, pathogenesis, and immunity. Thank you for your attention.